Oi! Soon the offending pink chalk had been vigorously brushed away by Mr. Lemming, who then proceeded to sit down on the piano stool himself to try out some of the bass notes, which had gone wrong. Alicia and Betty watched breathlessly. Most of the girls, guessing the some trick was being played, watched eagerly too. They were well rewarded when Mr. Lemming rose from the stool. He was wearing a long black overcoat, and on it was a wonderful pattern of bright pink. Mr. Young stared at it in amazement. Ah, you have it too, cried. He cried. See, Miss Grayling, Mr. Lemming has brushed up against something also. I will soon put him right. In spite of being under Miss Grayling's eyes, the girls began to giggle. Miss Grayling looked very puzzled. Your coat was quite all right when we came along here, she said to Mr. Lemming. I'm sure I should have noticed it if you had brushed against anything so violently pink as this. In any case, there is no wall as pink as this chalk. Whatever can have happened? She walked to the stool and looked at it very closely. Alicia and Betty hardly dared to breathe, but the invisible chalk lived up to its name, and Miss Grayling did not see a sign of it. It did not occur to her to sit down and see if the same thing happened to her. Still, feeling puzzled, she took Mr. Lemming out of the room and the lesson proceeded again. Not until the end of it did poor Mr. Young sit down on the stool again. When he got up, behold, he was as pretty as a sight as before. And the girls stuffed their hankies into their mouths, trying not to explode with mirth. Mr. Young noticed nothing this time. He walked pompously to the door and gave the girls the quick little bow he always kept for them. Good morning, young ladies, and out he went, showing his patch of brilliant color. As he went, the bell for break rang, and the girls tore into the court, longing to give way to their pent-up laughter. Alicia, you had something to do with it. What was it? Oh, it was marvelous. When he turned round to the blackboard, I thought I should die. Betty, do tell, was it your trick? How did you do it? I looked at the stool, and there wasn't a thing to be seen. That reminds me, said Betty to Alicia with a grin. I must get a wet cloth and rub it over the stool. She disappeared, and the girls searched around Alicia, begging her to tell them her secret. Meanwhile, Mr. Young was walking down one of the long corridors, quite unaware of his beautiful decoration. Mademoiselle Dupont happened to come out of a room just behind him and stared disbelievingly at the extraordinary sight. She raced after him. Monsieur Young! Ha! Monsieur Young! Mr. Young was scared to both Mamsells. He hastened his steps. Mamsell ran more quickly. Monsieur! Attendant Z, voice free. Wait, you cannot go out like that. It is terrible. Mr. Young swung around, annoyed. What is it? What's terrible? This, said Mamsell, and tapped him smartly on the chalk. A cloud of it flew off at once. Mr. Young was horrified at being tapped so familiarly by Mamsell, and amazed at the cloud of chalk that flew from his person. He wriggled himself round to try and see it, remembering what Mr. Lemming's coat had been like. I will attend to you, said Mamsell, out of the kindness of her heart, and caught hold of his arms. She hurried him to a hall stand, took up a brush there, and with extremely vigorous strokes she removed the chalk from his clothes. He was angry and not at all grateful. Twice it has happened this morning, he said angrily to Mamsell, and actually shook his fist in her face, as if she was the culprit. She backed away, alarmed. Mr. Young snatched up his hat and went off, muttering to himself. He is not polite, that man, said Mamsell to herself. I do him a kindness, and he puts his fist into my face. I will never speak to him again. The only girl who had seen this episode in the hall was Darrell, and she hurried to others with a tidbit. I was going past the end of the hall, and I saw Mamsell banging at Mr. Young for all she was worth with a clothes brush. She panted. He was so angry. Oh, let's do it again. Alicia is a George's trick. It is always a mistake to play the same trick twice running, and Alicia knew it. But she could not resist the temptation to try it on Mademoiselle Dupont. Shall we? She asked Betty, and Betty nodded angrily. The girls crowded around to see the strange invisible chalk. They chuckled and laughed when they thought of the singing lesson, and they let the first formers into the secret too. Altogether, the trick cheered up everybody considerably, and the thought that they would play it once more gave them something to look forward to. Who can rub it on the mistress' chair before the French lesson this afternoon? Demanded Betty. Alicia and I can't. We have no chance of being in the room. Who is room monitor? I am, said Darrell. I'll do it. Give me the chalk. What do you do? Just rub it over the chair. 10 minutes before afternoon school, Darrell slipped into the second form classroom. It was a job that week to tidy the bookshelves, clean the blackboard, and see that the chalk was handy and dusted there. It took her only a minute to do these things. Then she went to the chair there, stood behind the desk, and took the chalk from her pocket. She was about to rub it over the seat of the chair when a mischievous idea struck her. Couldn't she write something short so that a word would appear on Mamsell's skirt and send everyone into fits? It would have to be short word. I'll write "Oh, she said, Darrell to herself in glee. I'll have to write it backwards so that it will come off on Mamselle the right way round. So, very painstakingly, she rubbed the chalk on the seat of the chair in the form of letters O and Y. Fancy going about it with the written on you? How all the girls would yell. The bell went for lessons. Darrell slipped the chalk into her pocket and went to her place. She giggled when the rest of the form came in. Did you do it? Did you have time? Whispered the girls. Darrell nodded. Then in came Mamselle, appearing to be in quite good temper, and the door was shut. Mamselle sat down at once. She had very tiny feet and did not like standing. The girls watched eagerly. When would she stand up? Darrell could hardly wait for her turn to her back to the class. What would they say when they saw what she had written on the chair? Jean was called to the blackboard to write something. Do it all wrong, hissed Darrell. Then Mamselle will cut up to correct it. So much to Mamselle's surprise, the usually careful Jean made ridiculous mistakes in the French words she wrote down, and appeared to be quite unable to put them right, despite Mamselle's exasperated instructions. At last, truly annoyed, she dismissed Jean to a seat and got up to put the mistakes right herself. The class saw her back view at once and gasped. Written across her tight-fitting skirt in bright pink letters were the word "Oi." Even Darrell was surprised to see it so clearly and suddenly felt very uncomfortable. It was one thing to make a patch of pink appear on somebody's clothes. It could easily be explained away. But how could the word "Oi" be explained? It was quite impossible. The class gaped at Mamselle's back view. They were absolutely taken back. They didn't know whether to giggle or to be alarmed. Darrell, you idiot! Suppose she goes walking up the corridor in front of all the other mistresses with that written on their skirt? Hissed Alicia. Really, you might have more sense. The thought of the other mistresses seeing Mamselle Oi really alarmed the form. Miss Parker would certainly not approve. She would consider it most disrespectful. But how to get it off? That dreadful pink Oi flashed back and forth as Mamselle wrote on the board, turned to the class to explain, and wrote again. I'll tell Mamselle she's got some dust on something on her skirt and I'll brush it off, promised Darrell in a whisper at the end of the lesson. But she had no chance to, for Mamselle walked off in a hurry, remembering that she was late for the first form next door. And the first formers had the surprise of their lives when they saw Mamselle's pink oil flashing at them every other minute. They couldn't keep back their giggles, and Mamselle grew more and more furious. What is there so funny about me this afternoon? She demanded. Is it my hair? Untidy? Is there mud on my face? Are my shoes not a pair? No, Mamselle, said the first form, almost helpless with trying to stop their laughter. I am not funny, and I do not feel funny, said Mamselle severely. But I shall soon do some funny things. Ah, yes, I shall soon say 100 lines of French poetry from you. Please, and from you. Aha, I shall soon be very funny. With that, she swung around to the blackboard and the oi flashed again. The first form clutched one another in agonies of suppressed laughter. But all the same, they had the sense to grab Mamselle before she went out of the room. We'll have to get that off her before she goes, said Hilda, or else the second formers will get into an awful trouble. I expect they meant to brush it off somehow and didn't have the chance. So before Mamselle left the first form room, Hilda politely offered to brush down her skirt as it was all dusty with chalk. Teen, said Mamselle, looking down at it. This blackboard chalk, it's not good for dresses. Thank you, Hilda. Was gentle. You are kind. She stood like a lamb whilst Hilda assiduously brushed her skirt back and front and got rid of the pink oil. Then she walked out of the room. The second formers who had finished their lesson were watching for her, hoping to brush her down themselves before she went off to the little room she shared with Miss Potts. With great relief, they saw that Mamselle's skirt was now spotless. They went back to their form room and sank down into their chairs. Thank goodness, said Alicia, we might have got into a first-class row over that. Potty or Nosy would certainly have reported it if they seen that oi. You know how annoyed the mistress get if they think we have been really disrespectful. Darrell, you were an idiot. I suppose Sally put you up to it. Fine head of form she is. Shut up, said Darrell, annoyed with herself and everyone else too. Sally had nothing to do with it. I just didn't think, that's all.